Hey, welcome to Season 6 of the Two Text Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, David Harvey, and my name is John Andrews. Yeah. So this is a podcast of two friends from two different countries meeting every 2 weeks to talk about the Bible. Each week we pick one text to talk about, which invariably leads to us talking about two texts and often many more. Now this season we're exploring Jesus' I am sayings in John's Gospel and how they draw us into a bigger vision of who Jesus is. Hi David, it is great to be back with you. We're continuing on our conversation of the I ams, and just loved our chat last time on I am the bread of life. It was just, wow, so enriching. Without stretching the pun too far, it filled my heart, filled my belly. It was marvelous. It was good food. It was good food.
I like it. Are we gonna have a pun for each of the I am statements? Now I feel like a challenge has been laid down.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, I was speaking to someone today, and this is the first person I've ever met who said this to me. They've said that they've literally listened to every one of our two text podcasts, so they were caught up completely.
That's a determined and dedicated listener for sure. I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
Yes, absolutely. But we're wanting to lean into probably the second I am. I am the light of the world, having moved from the bread of life in chapter 6. We're now moving into chapter 8 of John.
And you saved everyone, John. I literally was about to say, John, why don't you shed some light on what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, this could go.
Fortunately, I can edit that
very
joke out.
This could go very badly.
So we're in John chapter 8 then, aren't we? And is it worth saying that you see again this pattern that'll probably take us a couple of episodes to work through, that the I am sayings don't happen in isolation, right? And that when you're studying the I am sayings, it's always worth, I think, well, let me try and say this more succinctly. I don't think you can interpret I am the light of the world by just reading John 8 verse 12 and thinking, I wonder what that means. Yeah. I think the stages of study, like what's actually going on in John's whole gospel. How has John spoke about light in this gospel? How is light spoken about in the Old Testament? And then that prepares you, I think, to then come back and read again what happens before and what happens afterwards. And I think you regularly see, like using last time as an example, I am the bread of life follows the feeding of the 5,000, alludes to Moses and the Exodus, and of course, has, as John shows us, underlying communion type tone. So there's lots and lots goes on that you never would see if you just read the one verse and move on.
True. And I think it's one of the wee dangers, because the I am statements, the big seven, are so popular within the church and many times referred to in passing, not necessarily unpacked, just in passing. The danger is they're sort of reduced down to sort of fridge magnet dynamic. It fits nicely on a nice fridge magnet, and we recite them. And of course, there's value in that, but there's a lot of heavy lifting, as we've seen already, going on around these I am sayings. And this one we're about to talk about is again no exception to that. In fact, if anything, John is solidifying the pattern, and he's really showing us here that actually within the context both of the chapter before chapter 7 and the chapter that comes after chapter 9, you've got huge bookends to this statement, which are all feeding into it and flowing from it for us in John chapter 8. So shall we jump in and read it and have a go and get stuck in?
Let's do it. So I'm going to read from verse 12, and we'll need to come back to some of the surrounding context as we unfold that. I'm going to read from verse 12 down to verse 30, just to set something of the scene of the conversation. But as many of you will have realized, as soon as you start reading John, it's kind of hard to stop. So, but here we go. John 8, verse 12. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." The Pharisees challenged him. "Here you are, appearing as your own witness. Your testimony is not valid." Jesus answered, "Even if I testify on my own behalf, my testimony is valid, for I know where I came from and where I'm going. But you have no idea where I come from or where I'm going. You judge by human standards. I pass judgment on no one. But if I do judge, my decisions are true because I am not alone. I stand with the Father who sent me. In your own law it is written that the testimony of 2 witnesses is true. I am the one who testifies for myself. My other witness is the Father who sent me." Then they asked him, "Where is your Father?" "You do not know me or my Father," Jesus replied. "If you knew me, you would know my Father also." He spoke these words while teaching in the temple courts near the place where the offerings were put. Yet no one seized him, for his hour had not yet come. Once more Jesus said to them, "I am going away, and you will look for me, and you will die in your sin. Where I go, you cannot come." This made the Jews ask, "Will he kill himself? Is that why he says, 'Where I go, you cannot come'?" But he continued, "You are from below, I am from above. You are of this world, I am not of this world. I told you that you would die in your sins if you do not believe that I am. You will indeed die in your sins." "Who are you?" they asked. "Just what I've been telling you from the beginning. I have much to say in judgment of you, but he who sent me is trustworthy, and what I have heard from him I tell the world." They did not understand that he was telling them about his Father. So Jesus said, "When you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am, and that I do nothing on my own, but speak just what the Father has taught me. The one who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, for I always do what pleases him." And even as he spoke, many believed in him.
Wow. Wow. And that, as you say, that it's sometimes hard to know when to stop in John, because that conversation runs the whole way down to the end of chapter 8, and even there's a sort of a follow-up story bleeding into chapter 9. So it gives our listeners a wee bit of the flow of the context of that. But wow, magnificent stuff. And of course, you know, you hear the words of Jesus, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." And we can't hear that after having reflected on both our journey through Tanakh and into John's Gospel, and thinking for a little while on John's prologue. We can't hear these words and not be immediately catapulted back the way, right? We are being catapulted back to the prologue, right?
Totally. I mean, it's interesting. Like I said to you before we started recording, how much this reminds me of the prologue. And then reading it out loud, I was like, oh, even more than I realized it reminds me of the prologue. And,
for sure.
I mean, I think it's actually really fun if you were doing this, you know, not while driving to school on your commute, but if you're sat with your Bible. It's actually really fun to open your Bible to John 8 and then stick a finger in there and flip over to John 1 and actually read the two texts together. Because, so like if I jump over to John 1 for a second, you know, let's remind people of this. And I'm just going to read it again, John, if that's okay, because it's too good not to read. But think about how John 1 starts. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Like, think about the questions that were being asked of Jesus in this passage. Right? Yeah. Where are you from? Where's your Father? Right? Yeah. In the beginning was the Word was with God. The Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that had been made. And then we get to the bit that I think helps us today. Yeah. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. That life was the light of all humanity, right? Yeah. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And I think I've made the joke before on two texts that if you were writing this yourself and had never heard it before, I don't think you would ever expect the next line. So you get the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And then it's there was a man sent from God whose name was John, which feels like a real right turn, especially as we learn very quickly that John is not the light that shines in the darkness. He's not the one that was in God. He's just some guy called John that's entered the story. But what do we know about John? And unlike in the synoptics, we only hear one thing about John here. He came to witness and testify concerning the light so that all might believe. And then we get verse 9, the true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world. The world was made through him. The world did not recognize him. So, I mean, we're doing this to audio. I hope if somebody sat with the two texts in front of themselves, John 1 and John 8, you'll realize, notice, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. And the response the Pharisees give is, who witnesses about this? And you realize, oh, this is following exactly the same pattern as the prologue.
Yes, completely. And I think we said when we reflected on the prologue that the prologue gives us a key to sort of both what to look for in John, but also in many ways a key in how to read it. And this is a classic example, and you have it in the statement of Jesus, whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, in that sense that the darkness in the prologue, hasn't understood or overcome the light, which is absolutely beautiful, but they will have the light of life. And I love how in the I am statement, Jesus is linking light and life and that sense of overcoming darkness. That's all massively represented in that prologue language, isn't it? Where it's being presented to us that the light has come, the light is a person, and that light has overcome darkness. And of course, you can't help hear that in John 1 and not be catapulted even further back into Genesis 1. I mean, it's an incredible, it is unmissable, like hyperlinks, right? It's this is intertextuality and it's most magnificent and glorious. I think this tracking of the light conversation is just outstanding as we start to see it trace its way through the darkness, but also trace its way through Tanakh towards the representation of that light in the person that we understand as Jesus. And so we hear that, we see that light exploding in John 1, but of course the very first thing that we see exploding from the work of God, Elohim, in Genesis 1 is let there be light, and there was light, and everything else is set according to that light.
Well, and you get this real doubling down on that he came, but they did not know him. You feel that really unpacked in John 8:14. Like, I testify, my testimony is valid. I know where I am from, where I'm going. You have no idea where I'm from and where I'm going. You judge by human standards. I don't even judge. But if I was to judge, it would be true. Like, you get this increasing unpacking of that if you don't see that Jesus is the light, you don't see anything at all.
Yeah.
And I think this is a fascinating Johannine theme that we, I want to say this carefully, but John, I think, is telling us this. If we're mistaken, we assume a person can be clever and can know things, but can miss that Jesus is the light of the world.
Yeah.
John wants us to see that if a person misses that Jesus is light of the world, they're wrong in everything.
Yeah.
And of course, that's not probably doesn't sit well with modern philosophy, but I think that's the way to read John's gospel, is that once somebody cannot know or does not know that Christ is light of the world, assume that everything that they say is treated with suspicion. And, so like, if you don't mind me just rolling earlier, just a little moment, this is essentially the same group that Jesus was talking to in John 7. Right. So hold what I've just said in mind. If you don't, and interject, John, if you think this is wildly off cue, but I'm saying that John's gospel wants us to see, if you can't see that Jesus is light of the world, then the likelihood is, And not because you're clever, but because Christ has come, because you've encountered Christ.
Yeah.
The likelihood is you're not going to know about a whole host of other things. Right? So notice, like, they come, John 7:40, on hearing Jesus' words, some people said, this man is a prophet. Others, he's the Messiah. Still others asked, how can the Messiah come from Galilee, right? And there's this whole back and forwards, right? And then the Pharisees get involved, and they start talking in verse 47. Oh, he's deceived you also. Have any of the rulers or the Pharisees believed in him? No, but this mob that knows nothing of the law, there's a curse on him. And then in one of the most understated very next sentences, Nicodemus, who had gone to Jesus earlier, who is one of their own number. So the Pharisees have just made the point, like, none of us have believed in this Jesus. In the very next sentences, Nicodemus, one of the Pharisees, right? And then they say this, and this is really profound. So they say, no, none of us has believed. Then Nicodemus is turned up, and of course they're proved wrong. Then they say, this is what they say to Nicodemus: are you from Galilee too? Look into it, and you will find that a prophet does not come from Galilee. So the Pharisees say two things. They say, have any Pharisees believed him? Right? And then, just in case you miss it, John points out, well, actually, awkwardly, Nicodemus, who's actually there at this exact moment, he has. So they then follow up with the second question: are you from Galilee? You should know that a prophet doesn't come from Galilee. At which point, like, drum roll in the corner to last season of two texts, Jonah is from Galilee. So the Pharisees don't believe in Jesus. They don't realize that one of their own number is actually a follower of Jesus, and they don't even know the scriptures well enough to know that Jonah's from there. Do you get the point I'm saying that John is trying to get at? And John's saying, well, this is obvious because they don't know that Jesus is the light of the world. So now, because they're wrong on that, they're just wrong on everything. They're constantly saying things. And I think that's important because John doesn't actually give you a footnote at this point to say, oh, by the way, Jonah's from Galilee. They're wrong here. Yeah. I think he now trusts you as the reader to realize you get this now, that when the Pharisees are speaking in John's gospel, what they're saying is probably not true. Not because they're liars, just to be really clear. I don't want to be accused. It's because they don't see with the light. Therefore, they just can't find their way around. I mean, that was a lot, John, but does that make sense?
Well, it makes total sense in the context of both where we're at and also, again, how John has introduced the prologue. You know, he has said that actually, though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came unto his own, and his own did not receive him. So you're getting this sense of they aren't accepting or recognizing who he is, and therefore, as a result of that, everything he says to them is misunderstood. It's off beam, or they're so set in their way of seeing him that they're resisting anything they hear about him. And I think even the Nicodemus story is an interesting one because it runs as a little thread all the way through John's gospel. So we meet him in 3, we meet him here again in 7. He pops up again right at the crucifixion with Joseph of Arimathea to sort of take the body away. And he's clearly assisting Joseph of Arimathea, which seems to suggest that Nicodemus has really, come all the way out in terms of being a follower of the Messiah, of Jesus. But again, that struggle within that religious community to recognize him and see him, to understand who he is and what he's about, and therefore that light eludes them as they sort of seek to try and wrestle. And John, more than any other gospel, does show the contest between Jesus and the religious community. I think the other Luke builds up to it gently. It sort of explodes towards the end. But in Luke's gospel, you see Jesus trying to befriend the Pharisees, having dinner with Pharisees, meeting with Pharisees. It gets more tasty as the journey goes on. But in John, it feels like a battle from the very beginning. It feels like you've got a lot of pull and push, and the religious community and sections of that community just cannot see who Jesus is or refuse to accept who Jesus is in terms of both his own claims and the claims of other witnesses.
Yes, I think that's absolutely true. And John wants to build on that. He wants us to see that. And I just think it's really fun as a reader to not miss this stuff, right? Yeah, and this came back to me just during the Easter season, and we all kind of know this. It's baked into our visual that Jesus is in the garden, and Judas and the soldiers come. And we're told, John says, they come carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. And it's really interesting that John at no point has mentioned that Jesus' disciples have torches or lanterns.
Yeah.
And then you remember that when Judas left Jesus, John told us, and Judas left, and it was dark. Right?
Yeah.
And so you get this stunning sense that, like, for John, Jesus is the light of the world. So when you're with the light of the world, you don't need torches and lanterns.
Yeah. Very good.
But Judas has left Jesus now. So when the next time we see Judas, he's scrabbling around in the dark with a torch and a lantern trying to see things. I mean, that's the level at which I think John wants us to see this. It's like once you're no longer with light of the world, it's like coming up to a dark cave and deciding, I don't think I need a torch, and I just love how consistent he is in holding that for us to see that Christ is the light, not just simply some kind of internal spiritual knowledge, but he is the light of all life. Everything is different in Christ. And I think you realize, for John, he really is the light of the world. And to your point, going right the way back to Genesis, like really, literally the light of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the same way that we see that light in Genesis, transform the earth, transform the material that he's working with, that shapeless, empty, chaotic substance that he's dealing with. And by the end of the creation story, all of that is transformed into shape, substance, and order.
Yes.
But of course, the first thing that allows all that shape and substance and order to materialize and happen is because light begins first. Light comes first. So the light becomes the opening salvo of the creation story. It becomes, as it were, the foundation, the framework on which everything is able to be built. And if you read the creation story in that sort of order, that the light coming first, actually everything then you're arguing sort of comes out of that light, because it comes because of that light. And therefore, nothing in the creative order makes sense without that light. The light is actually the thing that kicks it all off, and it's the thing that ultimately makes it all hang together. And of course, the light of creation is not the light of the sun or the moon. That comes in day 4. The light of creation is God's light himself. It is the Lord himself coming in. And that absolutely even fits with the pattern that we're getting in John's gospel. John saying from the very beginning, he is the light of life. And therefore, everything that you're about to see will only make sense if that light is actually part of who you are too. If you've embraced that light, understood that light, comprehended that light, as John says in his prologue, then actually everything I'm about to say will have a sense of meaning and purpose and trajectory and direction. Without it, it's going to look like chaos, because that's what it looks like in the darkness. Without the light, darkness reigns, and in darkness, both literally and theologically, metaphorically, it's chaotic. It's in the light that there is life. It's in the light that there is order. It's in the light that there is shape. It's in the light that there is substance.
Yeah, and of course, I was wondering when you were saying that about how, like, where this text here in verse 15. Well, I mean, leading into it, you've no idea where I come from and where I'm going. And of course, we've been told right from the start he's from God. But if I do judge, my decisions are true, right? And again, you've got this sort of elemental nature of things going on. To your point, what you were saying about creation, now you've got this sense that he is, that there's a, not that he simply speaks truth, but he is truth, as we'll find later on, that you're talking. I think what I'm trying to say is when you were reading that there, I was thinking about, you're describing reality from a biblical perspective.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that my decisions are true. Jesus is just simply saying, this is true. This is, this testimony, this witness. And I was thinking about how, what does a witness do? They shed light on the situation, don't they? It's like they reveal what has actually happened. And it's interesting to me that John does something really interesting in that passage as well, because you've got this solidity of Christ's truth, but then we've had John the Baptist as a witness in chapter 1. Yeah. So it's really interesting to me that you expect that what Jesus will do is say, John 1 says, the light came into the world. There was a witness called John who testified to him. This light was the true light. So then over in John 8, we get, I am the light of the world. Well, what witness do you have? And you anticipate that the answer will now be, John the Baptist was my witness, right? But actually, Jesus doesn't recall John the Baptist as his witness. Instead, he goes to the Father and recalls the Father as his witness, as the one who sent me, which I think is really fascinating, because in some level, you can kind of forgive the Pharisees for saying, where is your Father at this point? But I think in terms of how John's now building this bigger story of the gospel, I'm curious what you think about it. I just think it's interesting that Jesus doesn't bring up John the Baptist as his witness here.
Yeah, it's an incredible moment, really, because it allows you to see the echo of the prologue, but it's like Jesus takes it one step further. And of course, as you lean more and more into chapter 8, if we'd have read the whole of chapter 8, it gets very, very tasty indeed as this progresses. And becomes extremely aggressive by the end. In fact, by the end of chapter 8, they are threatening to stone Jesus because of the ultimate trajectory of his argument. You get this gorgeous, thinking about our soft I ams right at the end of the chapter. He says, truly, or amen, I tell you, before Abraham was born, I am. And they picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus hid himself, slipping away from the temple grounds. So you get this. Jesus himself is ratcheting up the argument. He's actually taking it to a level where they cannot simply rely on, I'm using the wrong language. It's not that they rely on the witness of John, but Jesus is not even appealing to the witness of John. Jesus is appealing to a higher witness, which makes then his claims that he is the light, his claims that he is this I am, even more controversial, because the ultimate witness is his Father. And in this context, he's pointing to the Father as God, which again is an issue that freaks them out in chapter 8. So it looks like Jesus is deliberately doing that because he doesn't want them to be mistaken. He wants them to see where his ultimate authority comes from, and it comes from the Father.
Yes, and I think that's exactly the point, isn't it? It's in a strange way, even though we know that John is a witness to Jesus, Jesus is not being drawn down to that level of the conversation. Yeah. And I mean, I was interested as well when as you were reading that there, it's interesting that this passage has quite a few, I love your term of soft I am. So John 8:24, I told you that you would die in your sins if you do not believe that I am. Right? A lot of the translations give us an I am he. And then in verse 28, when you've lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am, and that I do not speak on my own, just what the Father taught me. And then you referenced that last one there in John 8:58. Very truly I tell you, Jesus answered, before Abraham was born. And this time a lot of the translations keep it, I am. And the reaction of the people to pick up stones is, I think, really important here, because you stone somebody in that context for blasphemy.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that, well, what blasphemy has happened? To claim that you're older than Abraham is not blasphemy. That's just a bit insane, right? It's to their point. They're like, you don't even look like you're 50 yet, and you claim to have seen Abraham. I think that the people are reacting because he said, "I am." I think that there's a reaction that goes on there. But to your point that you were making, it's interesting. Right back at the start of verse 12, "I am the light of the world." Right at chapter 1. They did not recognize him. I think there's something very subtly ironic here. That I am the light of the world, but you do not know me. Before Abraham was, I am. And they pick up stones to stone him and are unable to see him.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That like Jesus was hidden.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the Greek, John, as I'm reading it right now, but I think there's a level wherein he is hidden at this point rather than simply hiding, if that makes sense. And there's a level for me where it's almost like, well, yeah, because these people can't see, right? They don't have the light anymore, and I just think it's really and crypto is the language. It's like I think it's really beautiful. It's not a beautiful scene. They're trying to kill him, but I do think it's making the point that John's gospel has been making all the time, that without Christ, without the light of the world, you're not going to be able to make sense of things.
Yes.
And maybe, John, maybe I could say this. I'd love to. This will be my last comment, and I'll throw it to you. But maybe that sets us up well for the next conversation about this, because imagine John's gospel with no verses or chapters. So I am the light of the world. We don't think that you're the light of the world. We're going to pick up stones to throw them at you. But, oh, wait, we can't see Jesus. And he went out of the temple. And as he walked along, he saw a man blind from birth.
Yeah. Amazing. And I love your little, I think connection there to the fact that he's hid from them. I just noticed another lovely little connection in John 12, where Jesus is speaking very similar words. And he says, the Son of Man must be lifted up. They ask, who is the Son of Man? Jesus told them, you're going to have the light just a little while longer. Walk while you have the light before darkness overtakes you. Whoever walks in darkness does not know where they are going. Believe in the light while you have the light, so that you may become children of light. And then it says this, when he had finished speaking, Jesus left and hid himself from them. So there's almost an identical conversation about light and hiding. You've got that in John 8. You've now got the repeat of that, not with, I think the context there is not the religious communities, but the people in general. The crowd is also there in John 12. And of course, end of John 12, Jesus is about to turn his face towards Jerusalem. And it's all going to kick off. But isn't it interesting that you get the same idea that in a group searching for the light but not recognizing him, he's hidden from them. And the same language used in John chapter 8. And it's a fascinating understanding of that actually, if we will not see or we cannot see, is there a sense in which, he can be hidden from us because we're in the darkness and not in the light. Now, I know it's a difficult idea, but I think it's something that John seems to be tugging on and pulling on, not just with the religious community, but if he has come to them and they do not recognize, there's a sense in which there's a hiddenness, and they're not seeing who he actually is, that he is the light of the world. And I thought that was a fascinating link between John 12 and John 8 in terms of the use of the similar word. So that's it for this episode. Now, we know there's always more to explore, and we encourage you to dive into the text and do that. If you like this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you rated it, reviewed, or shared it. We also appreciate all our listeners who financially support the show, sharing the weight of producing the podcast. If you'd like to support us, visit twotext.com. But that's all for now. So until next time, from David and I, it's goodbye.